Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Gina Smarecki, and I am the events manager at Nuspire, and I will be your host for today's live session. The next hour is going to be all about artificial intelligence. We have some experts that are going to be talking about how AI can enhance your security operations. We're also going to address some common concerns, misconceptions around AI, and show some practical applications of how AI can be used in threat hunting and incident response, and a lot more. So if you have questions during the presentation today, please submit them in the Q&A tab. We're planning to leave about 10 minutes at the end for questions. We are recording today, so you don't have to take notes or anything like that. You will receive an email with a link to watch the recording and share it with whoever couldn't make it today. So at this time, it is my great pleasure to introduce you to our speakers today, J.R. Cunningham, Michael Wilson, and Marcy Elder. JR is the Chief Security Officer at Nuspire and is responsible for the company's global security program and consulting organization. With 27 years of experience, he's an innovator and premier thinker in cybersecurity and risk management. Michael leads the technology division at Nuspire, which involves the vision, strategy, architecture, infrastructure, development, and the production system, which we operate for Nuspire and our clients. Marcy is a seasoned product manager with a strong background in integrating generative AI within cybersecurity solutions. She has led the development of a cutting-edge AI-driven solution, significantly enhancing the field's capabilities within the tech space and specifically for how cybersecurity companies are leveraging Gen AI. Very excited to have Marcy on today. So before I hand this over, we'd like to get your input on our poll. So let me go ahead and launch the poll. And the question reads, let's see, launch the poll here.
And Gina, while you're pulling up the poll, for those of you that are attending, when you look at these 6 things, you may be very tempted to say yes, all the above, absolutely, and that's a fair answer. But really, what we're kind of after here is what's the big bugaboo with all of this? What's the thing that you're feeling or experiencing in the organizations that you're at, and we might use that for another piece of content or a future webinar. So if you can, pick the big one and let us know kind of what you're thinking about all this.
Yeah, so what your organization's biggest challenges in adopting AI for cybersecurity? We've got some votes coming in. We'll just give it another second here.
I see it says hosts and panelists cannot vote. So your opinion, if you're attending the webinar, is the only one that matters here. So please jump in there. We really appreciate when we do these polls, it actually turns into fodder for content that we create in the future conversations that we have. Even, Marcy on the product management side, we'll look at, what folks are saying and things like these and ask the question, how can we help you solve those problems in the future? So I really appreciate the poll question.
All right, and we have a really good number of responses here, so I'm going to go ahead and end that and share the results so everyone can see. This is really good. Can you see that?
Yeah, we can.
And there we have it. Expertise and skills.
Great.
Privacy and policy. Yep. Integration. Okay. Really good.
A little bit of all of them, but a clear winner with the lack of AI expertise and skills. Awesome. All right, I'm going to stop sharing that and turn it right over to JR to kick into our agenda.
Great. Thank you, Gina. And I can't thank Michael and Marcy enough for being here. This is just a really cool thing. These are people who I admire and respect in this space, and there are not a whole lot of people that are willing to get out in public and speak about something that's so new, for our industry. So what are we going to cover today in the webinar? I posted on LinkedIn and I shared with all of you that this is not going to be one of those how we solve all of your problems with AI and all of that. There's too much of that in the wild already. really what we wanted to do is talk about why AI really isn't new in cyber and how we've been using AI even in its infancy for a very long time. Talk through some of the practicalities and real world applications of AI. Wanted to share with you some of our learnings about different ways to think about AI. And some of that has been influenced by our own learnings internally, which Marcy's going to talk about. Some of it comes from our experience, and some of it, frankly, has come from things that we've read and our journey in trying to get smart on all of this before we brought some leading edge AI to the market. And then, of course, we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about something practical, maybe a nugget that you can take away. So we're going to spend some time on prompt engineering. And then we're going to wax philosophical on the future of AI and cybersecurity. For those of you that follow the crew here at Nuspire, you know that we tend to be pretty accurate when it comes to predicting the future, and so we're gonna see if we can keep the streak rolling here regarding predictions and where we think all of this goes. And thank you so much for being here. We will take questions. If we end up with more questions than we can handle, just like always, we'll get back to you with our answers after the fact. Let me advance a slide here real quick. I want to talk a little bit about what do people think about when they hear AI. And there's a whole lot of dynamic nature to how we think about AI, including maybe what some of the elderly generation sees in the news, and that top of line stuff that makes it very scary. We've got some pop culture stuff on here, right? Those of you that are big Matrix fans like me will notice what's going on in the upper left hand. I'm reading all kinds of stuff in there right now because that's what we do when we look at the Matrix. But there really is a whole lot of pop culture fear, uncertainty, excitement, what could be, futurism when it comes to things like AI. And when we in cybersecurity hear folks with concerns about AI or questions about AI, they're generally not asking about this stuff, right? They're asking about some of the practicalities that you saw in the poll questions earlier. They're asking about what can I do with AI? Where can I take it? How can it help me do my job? How can it help me fill in the knowledge and skills gap that we all know is there in the cyber industry? So when a lot of folks outside of our profession think about AI, they think of this stuff that you're seeing on screen, right? Very Futurama or in sci-fi type stuff. And we actually are thinking about it in a much more structured and detailed way. So I think it's important to start with the evolution of AI. And I really want to start by sharing a story, and that was out of the 1990s. In 1996 and 1997, IBM's Deep Blue computer played Garry Kasparov in chess. And that really marked the first moment, at least that I can remember, that a very public demonstration of technology learning to think started to occur. AI and the idea of using advanced computational techniques in order to, quote, think has been around since the 1950s. But really, beyond those like early algorithms, like for code cracking and the Turing test and things of this nature, we really started to see some practicality in computers learning how to play games, chess, Go. These really marked some of the first instances where we were teaching computers to think a little bit strategically and act more like humans. And then, of course, when we got into, the 2000s, we saw an explosion. And Michael, you're much more suited to talk about what happened in that particular era of AI. So I'll hand it to you for your thoughts on that kind of period of like the 2000s to, the 2010s, the noughties, as we like to call it.
Yeah, so as JR said, we've had statistics for a long time, and a lot of these terms blend together. With statistics, we can predict the line of a curve, and machine learning is really the same thing, except with computers involved, making the decisions and the formulas much faster. So going into the 2000s and the 2010s, we had the building blocks there, but we just didn't have the capabilities. We didn't have enough data to get where we are today. I think fundamentally what has happened on the journey is we ran into a the internet, well, first of all, happened, right? Making data very accessible to us, computing became much faster. All of a sudden, we had this big data problem. We knew there was a bunch of data. We were having problems being overwhelmed with it. In cybersecurity specifically, the 2010s were all about, where's your data lake? You'll hear that, that phrase used a ton. And the challenge was always making that useful, so we collected all this data, and we finally are at the point now with Gen AI and kind of where we're going with the future is where we can finally make use of that data lake. We no longer have to have those prescriptive hypotheses. We can now ask our data and use dynamic hypotheses. So that's what I would say, kind of like where we came from, where we have gone. JR mentioned the Turing test, which I think came out in 1950-ish. That recently has been, it's kind of up for debate whether or not it has been passed, but for all intents and purposes, we've officially crossed that barrier. So it's a very exciting time to be alive to see this evolve.
And Michael, can you define the Turing test for people who might not know what that is?
It's basically just a test made by Alan Turing to kind of define, is this a computer or is this a person? And it's intended to basically evaluate and differentiate based on your responses. Are you an intellectual, like a human being that has thought and reason, or are you an artificial intelligence?
Thanks.
To give a little example of this period of time that Michael's talking about in the, really the 2000s up until the early 2010s, we've been using some form of artificial intelligence and cybersecurity for a very long time. If you go back to some of the early generation, what we today call next gen EDR platforms, Cylance would be an example of a technology that came out that was leveraging AI in the early days of using AI for endpoint security and detection, right? And so now that's commonplace today. We don't even think twice about using large language models and machine learning for endpoint protection and detection, but that was really novel back in the 2000s and early 2010s, and the cyber world has really embraced AI kind of from the beginning because we had to. So a lot of what we're seeing here is not new to the cyber industry. Rather, it's we're taking advantage of the advancements in a lot of this tech in order to do things better. How are we using it today? What do the modern day applications of AI and cybersecurity look like? What we see is these 5 here are really the hallmark uses of artificial intelligence when it comes to being better at the things that we already have to do without artificial intelligence. Threat detection, looking at what normal looks like for behavioral analytics. These 2 things are really centered around what does normal look like? What does a file on the computer look like, and why is it different now? Oh, is there a bad guy manipulating that file? Do I have an indicator of compromise? Is there something happening in the environment that doesn't act like normal? Or has a human being started to act not like normal? What does that mean? Are they turning rogue? Are they compromised? Did they do something accidental? Did they click on a phishing email? So we're starting to see AI really help us do some of the things that we already would do, just in a more effective and efficient way. Some of the newer ways that we're seeing AI be applied in our space is around IR and really with incident response, identifying what to go after and where to invest forensic resources into AI, into an incident. So let's say we have a ransomware incident. We're trying to figure out who's patient 0. What are the devices we need to take a closer look at? Where in the environment do we need to investigate further? Where do I need to invoke the really expensive incident response resources that know digital forensics? AI is helping us make some of those decisions. Vulnerability management. Vulnerability management is a great example of oftentimes it's not a needle in a haystack we're looking for. It's a needle in a stack of needles. We have hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of high and critical vulnerabilities, things that rank 7, 8, 9, 10 on the CVSS score. Which ones should I go after? Which ones should I pull the fire alarm to get patched? Which ones can I wait a month? Which ones can I wait until I upgrade the OS? We're starting to see AI evolve in a way that can help us make some of those decisions. And then finally, orchestration and automation. We all know how important this is in our industry to automate as much as we can. This is in part due to the talent shortage that we all talk about ad nauseum. It's in part due to the fact that products have a lot of different capabilities with different integrations. There's a lot of confusion in the market regarding capabilities within tools, especially the big platform tools. So the more of this stuff I can hypothesize on the use case, build a rule for it, automate it, the more I can devote the smart people to doing what I want the smart people to do instead of focusing on the monotonous and the day-to-day type stuff. So I share this with you because these are examples of where we're using this stuff today in order to be better cyber practitioners. None of this is theoretical. These 5 things exist today. They're being used. There are a lot of great products out there. There are a lot of great companies that are using the AI and large language models and machine learning for for these 5 things.
All right, next on the list is talking a little bit about the fears, concerns, and pitfalls that we're hearing about, and some of which have some truth to them, and some are just kind of stretched because of Hollywood. Thank you very much, Terminator. So the first one that I like to talk about is just around job displacement, and it's no secret that there are going to be some jobs that are just made not fruitful because of the invention of AI, generative AI models, LLMs. It is true that there will be some job displacement, but like anything else, don't forget that there are a lot of jobs that are being created. As a matter of fact, I was surprised to see recently starting to see applications and even openings for prompt engineers, which is a brand new position that I hadn't really heard of. I've recently had to research. I think the bigger question and the bigger thing we should be thinking about when it comes to job displacement is more along the kind of ethical and moral grounds for the jobs that we have today, especially when it comes to creative jobs. Now, I don't necessarily think that we've figured this out yet. There's a lot of ethical and moral things we need to figure out in terms of like ownership of creative content being generated by these things. I think that's where this gets a little bit strange. And honestly, I don't think anyone knows what the future is going to hold yet. But that's where I'm listening to the closest right now. I think that's what's the most interesting thing about what's happening in terms of job displacement is what we're doing with those fields specifically. With any new invention, it can be the .com bubble that we all went through all the way to now we're seeing AI. With these big waves, there's going to become weaponization of the new technology. This is very normal. I think the good news here and the way we see it is a little bit different than some of those previous technology advancements. And the reason I say that is because cybersecurity is already here. When it came to the .com bubble, cybersecurity was invented and brought in kind of afterwards, after the internet was becoming mainstream. We had to reactively go and build things to protect AI. We already have our entire industry wrapped around AI. They're adopting it. We're starting to see tools and things come out around it. So I think that the weaponization might be a little bit dramatized. And the hope is that the technology for the defenses like our company at Nuspire, we're able to leverage the technology the same way the attackers are. So I think we're at least leveling the playing field. And that gives us all hope here. The next thing I'll talk about is a little bit of the privacy aspect. I saw some of you said that you have concerns about it. This is probably the #1 reason why I've heard of people with prohibitive policies in their organization around generative AI and LLMs. They're worried about data leaving their environment. This is a real risk. There are solutions that are coming out to help protect. As an example, Nuspire, we're about to release something for our generative AI solution that does keep customer data segmented and safe. Our advice here is before you go and buy the latest thing that the sales guy is emailing you about that has to do with AI, ask the questions. Where is my data going? And if they don't have good answers for that, then it's probably a good idea to wait. With AI regulation and rules, I mean, it's just evolving. I think the big thing here is just we all need to sit back and wait for things to happen. There are not enough rules and regulations around how it's being used. especially giving credit to where it's due, things like that. So there's a big field that's about to boom around that, as well as a lot of new tools, I believe, that are going to come out to help us regulate and keep things safe. The last thing I'll mention is, with any new technology, there are going to be vulnerabilities. There are going to be jobs that are displaced. There are some negatives, but there are counter positives. I think the big thing with using generative AI and LLMs today, the big thing to watch out for in terms of pitfalls is the number one is probably the accuracy of the tools themselves. So there are quite a few of them out there. If you ask ChatGPT, if you ask Claude, just as an example, you might get different answers. When it comes to facts about what has happened and what's not, it's always a good idea to check those. And I do think that the fear around the accuracy is a little bit overstated. And the reason, my personal reason for thinking this is, if you Google anything from last year to 10 years ago, you're just as likely to get misinformation as you are now from an LLM. And as a matter of fact, that's part of the reason why LLMs have some issues with accuracy. It's just something that we as humans, we always need to do a double check. So that's our perspective on their accuracy.
Yeah, that's important. And to kind of bring it around to also to this, the overarching direction for this technology is, this is not the first time that we've had a giant technological upheaval in our society. Like the dot-com bubble was a good example, but I'm going to bring it back much further. So this is advice from my 95-year-old grandfather who I have coffee with. He has seen the rise and fall of more technologies than we can kind of imagine. And he remembers a landscape where you could not just go and travel across the country. There weren't gas stations, there weren't restaurants, there weren't rest areas for travel using a combustion engine. And we figured it out. There's not currently a great complete infrastructure for electric vehicles. There's not a great way to recycle batteries for electric vehicles. We will figure it out. With AI, there are a lot of legitimate concerns and risks, and we have done it before as a society. We will figure it out. It will just take continuing conversations like these, and it will take people trial and error and people to dive in and learn about this stuff to remove some of these things, make them better, make privacy concerns more to the top and be able to understand that. So it's like, yes, there are a lot of issues and things that we have to resolve, and we have, as a society, have done it before. We can do it again. We'll figure it out.
Marcy, I think I want to have coffee with your grandfather. I'd love to hear some of these stories.
I have to try to explain to him what I do for a living. And so him relating comes out with these pearls of wisdom. It's really lovely.
That's awesome. If we look at some of the regulatory environment, as an example, ISO 42001 is kind of starting to bubble up as a way to frame up and think about governing AI. And Marcy, I think you're spot on. We will catch up with how to structure guardrails around all this and think about it. And we're definitely in the infancy of AI and the governance aspect of it. From a real world applications point of view, let's talk a little bit about where AI can maximize some value here. And this part of the cybersecurity profession has always been difficult: detection, analysis, and response. And this really is that OODA loop, right? Observe, orient, decide, act. For those of you that have listened to us do these in the past, we like to talk about that, right? And essentially, that's the decisioning process that we go through when we see something. We're trying to figure out what it is. We have to make a decision and analyze and then act upon what we did. And in our profession, we like fast. Speed matters a lot. Because if we're not fast, the bad guys will get within that decision loop and they'll be one step ahead of us, and we can't have that happen. And so using artificial intelligence and large language models to do faster data collection analysis, threat detection and alerting, help us with our responses, and look for enemy activity when we believe something is amiss. that isn't revolutionary. We've been doing this since the dawn of our profession. What it does is it shrinks down that decision loop cycle to a point that it's potentially manageable and allows us to stay within the decision loop of the enemy. So when you think about this and you look at categories of security technology that are already leveraging AI, data collection analysis, threat detection and alerting, there's your EDR, there's your SIM, your vulnerability management applications, taking action on behalf of individuals by either quarantining emails or analyzing links and stopping bad things from happening. Like, we've all been the recipient of AI actually helping to make us more secure. Michael mentioned it earlier, but this is definitely the classic medieval, the bad guys build a taller ladder and the good guys build a taller wall on the castle, right? And we go back and forth. But the idea is, let's make this decision loop as short and as small as possible so that we can get inside how quickly the potential bad guys are making decisions and take preventative action or stop an attack before it happens. So again, this isn't new. This is stuff we've been doing since day one. We're just getting better and faster at it because of what AI is bringing to the table.
All right, now we get to the fun part of where things are going with cybersecurity tools that leverage AI. Up until recently, the best that we did with our cybersecurity data was put it into a SIM and make correlation rules. We would make different things. We would enrich the data. And that was kind of the best we could do. That was the most we could add value to the massive amount of data that we collected. I think what is changing now is we can finally take all that data and make use of it. We were all so used to paying for these big data lakes, and a SIM just looks at a little point in time minus some reporting, right? This is the first time where technology has kind of caught up to the problem statement of, I have a massive amount of data. I'm looking for needles in haystacks. We're finally able to deploy technology that allows us to actually do that searching in a constructive way. Over the last 10, 15 years, I feel like we've seen so many SIM technologies just come up, burst, and a new one would pop up. And one of the major problems that they all had was scaling with data. And I think what is very positive for all of us in security is feels like we're getting over that hump. We're not quite there yet. The SIMs are still prolific. There's still we're still trying to do things, but new technology is coming out that is allowing us to finally take use of all this data that we collect. And it's allowing us to be a little bit more proactive. So what is happening now is new tools are coming out that are allowing us to use this data, and we're finally able to be in a position to say, I see a trend that's heading one direction. I think I can go ahead and make this prediction. We were handcuffed in the past because of scaling issues and technology and the amount of data we had. We could barely keep enough infrastructure online just to report when two things happened about the same time as a correlation rule. We're finally over that hump. Now we can start trending, we can start predicting. And I think it's going to be really cool to see the cybersecurity products that come out in the next 5 years. The last thing that I'll mention is that, I talked about this a little bit earlier, but I think the thing that excites me the most about getting a little bit more predictive and around the code development aspects of things is that our problem statements are now dynamic. So you used to have a large amount of data and you'd have to go create a report. Let me make a report. This is the data that I want. This is the X value. This is the Y value. You had to kind of know what you wanted to look at. You had to have a hypothesis. What we're able to do now that is very different is you don't need a hypothesis to structure the data. You don't need a hypothesis to start asking questions. You can finally say, answer a question about this vast amount of data, and your generative AI and LLMs can adapt with your problem statement. They can switch it up. They can even give you insights into things that you hadn't thought of. You can ask it for ideas. And that's really exciting. And I think that is very encouraging for us in the cybersecurity industry.
when we think about AI as an instrument, if you will, we've struggled a lot, even at Nuspire, trying to think about, okay, how do we frame up AI in terms of solutioning and product development, and where does it fit into the overall scheme of things? And so wanted to share, and if you take any nuggets away from this, we've got a few of these upcoming slides that this is really where we think the value add that we're providing here in the webinar is. So one of them is Professor Ethan Mollick at the Wharton School of Business wrote a fantastic book called Co-Intelligence. And one of my takeaways from reading that book, by the way, I highly recommend it. A lot of us here at Nuspire have read it. Talks about making AI a helpful coworker. And in Professor Mollick's book, he talks a lot about the different personas that we can use for AI, and the way that we can view AI, the different lenses that we can view AI in order to make it more effective for what it is we need to do. And in the case of kind of all the modern open source large language models, the public LLMs, using AI as a helpful coworker really can provide an edge to a cyber practitioner, enhancing decision making, helping. Well, Michael mentioned data. If I want insight out of data, maybe I don't have to be a data scientist. Maybe if I know how to leverage AI as a helpful coworker, I can help uncrack the secret that's buried within a large amount of data to help me gain some insight and maybe make some decisions or plans in a way that's more efficient than what I would have been able to otherwise. We hear a lot of talk in our industry about being data driven, but the reality is a lot of our industry is still very qualitative and subjective in nature, because there isn't a lot of data from a historical perspective compared to other industries. You can go, if you pick another industry, let's say the building trades, construction, you can go back and look at the cause of every major building collapse, for 200 years, and you can start to get some insight into that history. We don't have a lot of that history in our industry, but we have a lot of data. And so using AI as a helpful coworker to help, look through data, gain insights, help us learn, also while eliminating as much noise as possible. I cannot think of an industry that's noisier than ours. New data, new techniques are coming out every day. And so we're a very noisy industry. And we always have to be kind of trying to figure out, what do I need to know? What's important for what I do? How do I stay unbiased? And how do I work with both technology and other human beings in order to be more effective at what I do? And really using AI to help me be a more effective coworker essentially turns AI into a helpful coworker. So if you get a chance, take a peek at the book. There's a whole chapter on this. I really loved it. Took a lot out of that, and really kind of helped, at least for me, structure some of the way that I'm thinking about how to most effectively use AI to be a better practitioner. Another example here, just in practicum, is prioritizing security alerts. I talked about noise a moment ago. There is no part of our profession noisier than this part. What's coming in from the SIM? What came in from my latest vulnerability scan? What are my EDR logs telling me? What's coming in from the network? We are just awash in security alerts, noise. And the answer to the question, which one of those should I care about right now? Super important. Show me which hosts that I have that are the most vulnerable that also aren't patched, or show me the hosts that are the most vulnerable that are also on my riskiest network or in the riskiest geography. These are questions that we cybersecurity practitioners have been asking for decades, and they've historically been really hard to answer. Show me the version of this piece of software in my environment. Show me where I lack EDR coverage out there in the wild. These historically have been very difficult. Gen AI can really help us prioritize critical threats by looking at things like context, geography, patterns. What does normal look like? AI is really good at figuring out what normal looks like. And so when we start to double click on something abnormal is happening, and that device or that part of the organization is vulnerable, and I haven't applied the appropriate risk treatments, and it's my most revenue sensitive application, we start adding all these contexts, and we can winnow down that noise to, okay, I need to go deal with this problem today in my environment, or I need to build a plan around better technology and controls. Huge. It's all about context. And Marcy, you've got some really good thoughts on how the type of AI we use is super important here. Can you expound on that a little bit?
Yeah, I can. And so this is why when we talk about this and we talk about Gen AI, not just linear AI, as we've referenced additional examples earlier in the webinar, but like one example to be like, yes, there's an alert that comes in that there is an application that's running on a machine. What's the context to that? There could be an incident that's raised, and then there's someone who is commenting on it. There's human text, there's human interaction on it, and we can see, oh, this is a, not just that there's an alert and this was flagged, but this is so-and-so, they need this application, or this application should be whitelisted across the organization. These are real examples that our clients are dealing with. And to be able to take not only the alert information, take the machine learning of, okay, this always happens in this time, and here's the other like information on that alert, but then what the security practitioners, what the user is saying, what the people are saying, and bring that all into the same thing. So it's human speech, context, the alert context, and bringing that together is something that is brand new. That's really powerful that we use Gen AI to do that. So that's an exciting advancement that we can get that just traditional AI can't get us. All right, and then we get to some of the topics that just I'm so excited to talk about, because these are things that we're doing and building, and I get to be on the front lines with the teams who are building this. So I love talking about this, but imagine, you've heard the term single pane of glass. You've heard the ability to access all of your data sources. There have been many companies that have touted this is going to be the future. We brought the future to now. This is a reality. It is extremely difficult to do, as every company, every security practitioner knows. It is so hard to get away from having to log into so many different systems. There will probably never be a future where we can actually get away from logging into different things to really deep dive into it. However, if you can actually just ask a question of, okay, tell me about this. And it has to pull information from your EDR source. It has to pull information from the SIM. It has to pull information from the data lake. It's got to pull from multiple different sources to be able to answer the question. That is time you didn't have to go and hunt for that information. And then you could go and pinpoint where you have to go and dig in. So when Gen AI can do that, by understanding the context of the question. So it has the context of how to go and hunt, what to go and pull. And then when you have all those different sources available to it, it's not just going by database rows and columns to be able to compare data. It is actually it has the context to understand how to pull and what to pull. So you can make really quick decisions with all the information that you need around a specific event from asking it a question. So now you say that you're a leader making those decisions. Imagine that you are a brand new employee in the security team who needs to also make these decisions to be able to update tickets, to be able to work things quickly. Instead of having to learn every new technology that comes out, those technologies are piped into one source to give you the ability to understand an alert and hunt and react to it by just typing in a question, by interacting with what becomes a co-pilot, a co-intelligence, as the book referenced, and it was really aptly put. But those multiple sources become even more powerful than we have been able to do before, where we have to manually correlate each one against each other. And AI can understand the structure for each, and then that just becomes it's just an intelligence that it just references. So it's a really powerful direction that this is taking us and we're able to do. All right, this is also my jam.
This is one of your favorites, Marcy.
It sure is. So something that's new also with the way that we interact with Gen AI is creative, whereas it's much more linear with traditional AI. Gen AI can create new things that it was not told to create these things. We don't even have full understanding of how the neural networks work behind the scenes truly for how it gets to these, but it is predictive based on its training data. So it will come up with responses based on the training data, but it could be something slightly different. So imagine that you're asking a coworker or a friend, how was your day? If you were to ask that question the same time twice in a row, you will get slightly different answers. Gen AI is the exact same way, where it may give you the same information, but it'll word it a little differently because its training data is based off of, imagine like every blog, every article, everything that has ever been written on the internet. How people speak is slightly different. There's tones, there's voices. So Gen AI can give you a different answer with the same information based off of the tone and the people that it has learned from. That is a boon to us in using it. So we know that we can give it a persona and it will give us better targeted answers for how you want to interact with it. So when you are creating prompts and you want to interact with it, think about it as a relationship where you have to kind of define what that relationship is going to look like for how you're going to get those responses. So you can tell it like who it is, what it is, what's the point. So, hey, I need you to be a feeling. I need you to be a caring, invested, involved, like collaborator on this topic, and treat me as though as this. So you can give it all of those parameters and you'll get a very specific response. You actually get better responses by doing that, because then it narrows down the sources, it narrows down the information it's pulling from to give you more accurate information. Something else is that since it's trained on language, the more clear, concise, specific language you give it, the better your responses will be, even down to using proper punctuation, using, like if you're asking a question, using a question mark at the end. Very small little things like that can make a big difference. So my recommendation would be to just go to one of the free ones out there and just play around with it. If you have never used ChatGPT before, or if you've never used it in this way, where you've only just asked questions and gotten an answer, try to play around with that and how you get answers out. We were in pen testing our solution, we were able to get it to kind of break out of things by giving it a very specific parameter for what it needed to be. It actually called me an absolute walnut, which was a wonderful test. Our data science team was so thrilled with that one, which we fixed. But it can be really funny. It can be really interesting to see what you get out of it. But those kinds of clear personas can give you very interesting but very tailored results for what you need it to do. Like I've used it to help me design an app, and it can give me options. It can collaborate and say, well, you could name it this, but here's what I think based on what I know about you, here's what I think you could do. And you can talk back and forth with it. You can have a conversation like a person, but they have it's got no stake in the game. So you can truly use it in so many different ways as a co-collaborator, and by defining that persona who you want to work with. So it is there are infinite number of ways to use it, but by doing that, that will give you a much easier direction on where you want to go.
This is really fascinating, Marcy, and just to share a little bit about kind of my practical experience with this, I've asked the same question to the same AI, but with different personas. So I'll say, you're a teacher and you're evaluating my tone, or you're a coach and you're evaluating my tone. What do you think about this? Versus you're a technical architect. Tell me what you think about this. Might be exactly the same content of the question, but the answers that come back are going to be slanted very differently, just as if I were communicating with a coach, a teacher, or a technical architect. And I think this is going to be an area where we see a lot of career opportunity for people regarding prompts and big data, and how to talk to AI in a way that gets the type of answers that we need. It's also really good to help us, use different perspectives on the same problem set, right? And we all kind of get stuck, especially those of us in the cyber industry. Sometimes we get stuck in our own little world. And if I can have AI remind me that there's another way to look at something and present it with a problem space, super powerful, sometimes a little embarrassing. Marcy, it hasn't yet called me a walnut. It probably is trying to hold back a little bit, but it really neat how when we start to work with prompting, we can actually get a different outcome from the same large language model. Pretty fascinating.
So now on to the future, we get to be a little bit predictive here. Just so this isn't set in stone, but this is what we believe and where things are going. The first one that I'll talk about is basically low-hanging fruit, in my opinion, and that is the processing of threat intel, being predictive around it, and around incident response. I think what's going to happen is we're going to be much better and much faster at processing the threat intel. So 10 plus years ago, we used to get flash warnings, is what they were called, from the FBI at a previous place I worked, with just massive lists of IP addresses and other IOCs, domains, things like that. We would then have to go and run that against a large amount of data that we had from a network monitoring tool. It would take days, sometimes even into the weeks, to go and try to analyze that information. A lot of that's been solved without necessarily AI, but where AI comes in is what we do with it and how quickly we can iterate on it. So we're no longer gathering these large files, distributing them. I think we're going to start not looking at one specific piece of data, but rather before that incident occurs, we're going to identify trends. We're going to identify things that are happening, the port scan and the weird port knocking that happened before the intrusion. I think we're going to get better at starting to detect those things so that we don't have to rely on analyzing our existing data for what happened in the past. Instead, it's, hey, watch out for this thing that could happen in the future. Let's start to protect ourselves. The next thing is that I'm really excited about is just how AI is going to evolve with other aspects of technology development. We write up here quantum computing because it's the big one. It's the big elephant. It's the next big bubble that is right around the corner. AI today is limited in speed and the amount of data by just simple like hardware constraints. I mean, just to train an LLM today takes a massive amount of infrastructure. It cannot be understated. That's a huge barrier to entry. That is going to be going away with something like quantum computing. Also, specifically to cybersecurity, quantum computing, it brings a bunch of weird, side effects with it, like encryption. The entire concept of encryption is that there isn't enough computing power in the world to break some of the keys that we have today. As soon as quantum computing comes out and then you pair it with something like AI, encryption is going to look very different. In my little bit of research around this, I think what I'm excited about are some of the new advancements in cybersecurity around, like I've seen the idea thrown around there around adaptive encryption, which seems really cool, which is something where we have, instead of one specific encryption methodology, think RSA or whatever other algorithm that might be out there. Instead, it's a dynamic, evolving algorithm that adapts to the changes in the computing landscape. I think that is kind of where things are going when it comes to cybersecurity. General tech is going to advance continually. It always will. But I think cybersecurity has to stay right there with it. And we're about to see really cool things. I personally kind of hope that the bubble waits a little bit because I think we need to learn more about AI first before we throw quantum computing in there. The last thing that I'll mention, and it kind of has to do with the prompt and how to work with LLMs that Marcy just talked about so much. I personally believe that we're in the dark ages of generative AI. And the reason I say that is it's really hard for people to think, especially for those of you who might not have played with ChatGPT or these LLMs that are available to you. It's hard to transition and think in a different way, such as making the AI your coworker, like what JR talked about. It's hard to think of problem statements. I think that what we will do and what was going to happen is people are going to have to start getting comfortable with it. When Google first came out and they just had one bar on their website that was a search bar, no one really expected it to have the effect that it would today, which is we now have a phrase, go Google it, right? I think the same thing is going to happen. It hasn't happened yet, but we're going to start asking AI instead. It's no longer going to be, go Google this, research it yourself, open up 420 tabs, filter the information and try to figure out what's nonsense and what's not. I think AI is going to solve that in a totally new way. I think that the prompting, though, is something that's going to go away so that it can be more accessible to everybody. Right now, we have to go and pull information from these models. In the future, I expect that the models are going to start pushing things to us. So I no longer have to ask AI, what should I do about this threat incident? What should I do with this threat intel? What should I do about this weird behavior that I'm seeing? I think in the future, it's going to be automatically asking itself those questions and giving us those responses, pushing information to us, rather than us having to pull the information back, which I think is going to make it much more accessible. The products that we see are going to be much more innovative and easier to use. And that's what I'm excited about.
Michael, when you think about looking ahead and making predictions on where some of this goes, where do you see that this middle piece with quantum? Like, do we see like major breakthroughs that drive like massive innovation, or are we going to see little breakthroughs like we have with artificial intelligence over the decades?
Well, if I had to guess based on the limited knowledge that I have, I feel like I have to preface this, right? Because I am not a quantum expert. I know just enough to know that I know nothing about it, right? I've read a couple books, whatever. I think the challenge is AI is accessible to all of us now. Shoot, I can go, just like Marcy said, I can go to ChatGPT, it's free, sign up for an account, and I can say, make me a web app that does this, and it can do it. It is so accessible. I think the challenge with quantum computing as a corollary is the hardware requirements are going to change massively when it comes to quantum computing. AI, we can adopt it, we can invent new things, and it fits perfectly into our existing infrastructure, ecosystem, tech stacks, everything else. It's just another feature that is changing how we think of things. Quantum computing is going to reinvent things from the hardware layer up, is the challenge there. So I don't think it's going to happen overnight like it did with AI. I think it's going to take a lot of time. But once that happens and there's a little bit of momentum behind it, it's going to get scary. We're going to move much faster than AI did. That's my prediction, at least.
Yeah. I think that has to get, it's got to get past some of the regulatory requirements for the different states, countries where we keep these kinds of data centers. Like, where do we keep the actual hardware that does this? I know in Michigan, there's some contention on bringing in new data centers and new places for this hardware because of the energy drain. So the energy cost to train models and the energy cost, if you imagine on a quantum supported model, is astronomical, and it's something that we have to be able to solve also before we get to a like where, like you're saying, Michael, AI is available to everybody now, and that is the current power drain. But if we're going to push it with quantum computing, there are a lot of other infrastructure considerations that have to come into place too. So it's
Yep.
a bit out there, but not necessarily impossible to imagine in our lifetime.
I mean, yeah.
Well, this team.
It's
Go ahead.
funny because we say that and we talk about it like it's so far, but honestly, if anyone here would have asked me, let's say 6 years ago, if we would in 6 years see an LLM that can do what it can do today, I would have said no way. So it's really tough to say. Things move so quickly in technology.
But when it comes to predictions, I would never ever bet against this team. I think we have a better record than Nostradamus in the last 2 years. So you all will have to keep making predictions as new information emerges as to where all of this goes, especially in that quantum and Gen AI realm. From a takeaways point of view, as we get ready to field any questions that we have, really it's these 4 things. We're using AI as a partner. You're going to see some exciting stuff coming from us here in the future, in the short-term future. that we think is really exciting. And it's really all about this one, using AI as a partner, leveraging data-driven insights to make really good informed decisions that get rid of some of the noise and the uncertainty in our space. Continuous ability to learn and stay on top of all of the change in our industry. Again, that's also a noise reduction strategy. AI is going to be really valuable for all of us in answering the question, just-in-time knowledge inventory. What do I need to know today to be the very best I can be at what I do? And what am I going to need to know tomorrow? And sometimes, I don't know something I need to know right now. So that third takeaway is super important, especially in an industry like ours where we cannot stay stagnant. What we knew 5 years ago, 10 years ago is almost irrelevant today. So using AI to help us keep the edge. The bad guys are keeping the edge. It's up to us to stay current, stay on top of things. And then really kind of a final takeaway. Please don't be scared of this. There's so many cyber practitioners out there that are terrified of this. We're not afraid of it. We think it's a tool that we can use to our advantage. Does it have downsides? Absolutely. But would highly encourage everyone, just like we had to do not that long ago with cloud. And all of us in the cyber industry were like, wait, what do you mean you're moving the computers away from the data center and you're sticking them over there in someone else's world, and I've got to secure these things? And we all had to get smart on cloud. AI is the same thing. We just have to be comfortable with the fact that no one has all the answers with this stuff today. There are a lot of prognosticators out there, but if we just stay on top of it, stay current, understand the state of the art, bend and flex as this technology changes, the regulatory environment changes, the world around us changes, the bad guys change. It's just really essential for us to have a good fundamental understanding of how all of this stuff works, be able to use it effectively, be able to help dispel myths. We put that myths and concerns slide up there earlier. It's going to be on us to be the subject matter experts on a lot of this and dispel a lot of the myths around AI, which is part of why we wanted to share with you all how we see this right now and how we're using it. But really, it's a fascinating time. And Marcy mentioned it earlier. Thank you, Grandpa, for this idea of, hey, this is a really exciting time to be doing what we do. We're alive at a really unique moment in history. And hopefully we've given you all here something that you can use and enjoy, and maybe a little nugget that you can take away and use in your profession. So with that, Gina, I will hand it back to you.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you for sharing all that. I know I learned a lot. I hope everyone learned just as much as me. That was super interesting. And I am halfway through the Co-Intelligence book. Highly recommend that as well. So keep reading on that. If anyone has any questions, please type them into the Q&A. We've got just a couple minutes left, but I do want to share a couple of resources here really quick. Our next webinar, which is going to be on September 18th, we're going to have all three of the speakers today back, in addition to our CEO, Louis Dunsworth. And this is going to be really exciting because we're going to be sharing the first public glimpse of Nuspire's new AI-powered cybersecurity experience. And this is going to include a live demo of our new mobile app with our built-in AI assistant. So I will go ahead and share that link in the chat for all of you in case you're interested in registering. I'll also put that in the email that goes out tomorrow. And stay tuned for a brand new ebook that we will be publishing very soon on AI. Watch for that one to come out. And of course, our website's full of fantastic resources. Take a glance at your convenience. We also have here a list of Gen AI tools and one more book suggestion. Marcy, do you want to quickly talk about these tools, and then JR, why do we recommend these books?
Yeah, sure. So the tools we have, so one, Copilot is Microsoft tools built into the Microsoft 365 ecosystem. It's really valuable if you have a specific license for it. It is paid by eSeat for Microsoft license, but it's beneficial if you need to have emails summarized, get action items out of recorded meetings. It's really beneficial as a work co-pilot. ChatGPT is kind of the big name that's most known across the industry. So there's a free version. It's easily accessible. You just go to the OpenAI website and you can sign up for an account and use that. Dolly is an AI image generator, which has been it is fascinating. We're actually starting to use it also, but it's a part of the OpenAI ecosystem. Claude is a tool by a company called Anthropic, which was built by people who broke away from OpenAI to try to really focus on integrity and transparency for AI and LLM tools. So Claude is another kind of ChatGPT-like version that you can use and to interact with. It's also free. There are other tools too that will bring in like Propensity. They'll bring in all the tools together. So there are so many options out there. If you do a Google search, you can come up with kind of the top ones and then pick your favorite, because some of them will have different quirks to them. Some have different different ways to respond. So you can find your favorite the way that works for you.
Thanks, Marcy. And yeah, I can comment on the books. I mentioned Co-Intelligence. I just absolutely loved the book. A really fantastic read. I like books that help me frame up how to think about this trend in our world. Ray Kurzweil wrote a book, The Singularity is Near, a while back, and it's since been updated. The Singularity is Nearer. Highly recommend that for putting AI in the context of where we're at in terms of human knowledge, from the domestication of fire and the invention of the wheel all the way up to sentient computation where machines are aware that they exist. Obviously we're not there, but he does a really good job of kind of laying out the timeline of human development and talking a little bit about where we're at with all this. So highly recommend that. A lot of great near real-time content out there. Recommendation for you would be to take some of the recommendations that Marcy put out here for tools, or if you're using something like a Perplexity and aggregating AI, and ask it what books about AI you should read and see what it says. And then for your prompt engineering exercise, say, you're a teacher teaching a course on AI. What books should I read on AI? And then say, you're a security architect and you want to get smart on AI. What books should I read about AI? You'll get different answers, and this is really fascinating. So I would encourage everybody to do that little thought exercise, and it really helped me kind of structure how I think about all this stuff, and also helped me with prompt engineering. No one's ever accused me of whispering, so I'm not sure I'm an AI whisperer yet, but the prompt engineering is a really fun exercise.
Thank you, JR. Well, it looks like we ran out of time covering all this information, but we will address the couple of questions that we had via email, and just to respect everyone's time today. We all have a busy schedule, but if you come up with any other questions, please email us at webinars@nuspire.com or contact us through our website at nuspire.com. Also, upon exiting the webinar, there's a short survey that will pop up, and we'd certainly appreciate any feedback that you have for us today. And with that, any closing thoughts from the speakers today?
I would just say thank you all so much. Really appreciate you being here. We're all trying to figure this out together. So if we can share something with you that's of value, please do so with us. We value your feedback. The survey is important to us. Anything you can provide us, we really appreciate.
That we're all on the road together for this. So we're happy to have your input and grateful you were here.
All right. Thanks for joining us, everyone, and have a great rest of your day. Till next time.